All right, here we are. We are streaming away. For those of you who are just listening in, what I am doing as I am speaking, first of all, welcome to the Canadian Commie. I am speaking to YouTube and Twitch chat right now. So as this goes on, I'm going to read comments from YouTube. If you would like to participate in that, please come on down to www.thecanadiancommie.com. Join in, have a chat with me, disagree with me, maybe point something out. If you're kind, we'll have a back and forth conversation. It'll be lovely. In lieu of that, I'll be reading articles today and commenting on the decline of Western civilization and how swiftly it's coming upon us. If you would like to donate, please consider donating to patreon.com/thecanadiancommie. Even $1 helps. Thank you so much. Welcome aboard. Already we have people coming in. Conton, Matthias, Peanut Butter Beatrice, Kevin. Let's go. Good to see you all. Always a pleasure. I want to jump into a hilarious piece of news that I've been following for quite some time. Austin Wallace, good to see you. Hey, how's it going? Missed the last two as I was camping. What did I miss? You missed everything, Austin. We solved the problems. Yeah, we solved them without you. I'm so sorry to say it, Austin. I'm going to start today with a what I consider to be like a really hilarious story. Just something that I think I've been following for a long, long time. I think I'm going to read this one in fullness. Oh, Kevin donates $9.99. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate that, my man. $9.99, very specific number. But thank you, Kevin, all the same. I do appreciate it. It makes me feel good about myself when people donate. That's the truth. Treats for Milo. You got it. You got it. He's over there eating some peanut butter as we speak. Happy as a clam. Blind as a bat. Love little guy. He'll be showing up in a little bit, I'm sure, and giving me some wines and demanding some cuddles very shortly. I'm sure of it. Jordan Peterson agrees to social media coaching after Supreme Court declines free speech case. So, for those of you who don't know, Jordan Peterson has been in an ongoing legal battle with the College for Ontario Psychologists about his social media posts. You know, how insane they are, and how it's pretty obvious that his schizophrenia has kind of overwhelmed his senses. And instead of somebody saying to him, hey, maybe you shouldn't have unfettered access to Twitter, he instead just posts all kinds of nonsense on Twitter and more or less looks like a crazy person. One of my favorites, I think really all-time favorite, is when he posted literal like cock-milking porn, like people connected up to devices that like milk their cocks, and he says something along the lines of, "This is what the Chinese have planned for you." Like just absolutely demented. He at one point there was a very prominent communist professor. I forget his name offhand, but he and Peterson got into a quick back and forth that essentially ended with Peterson saying, not directly these words, but the inference was clear that this professor should go kill himself. You know, desperately and deeply unprofessional shit. When people began to lodge formal complaints against Peterson for his deeply inappropriate conduct on Twitter, at one point he doxed some of the complainants on his Twitter and then pretended like it was an accident. So just desperately unprofessional behavior. Completely unprofessional behavior. And so the College for Ontario Psychologists said to him, hey bro, we are the oversight committee that you agreed to being a part of when you said you wanted to be a psychologist. We can't help but notice that your conduct on Twitter is not representative of what we here at the College of Ontario Psychologists expect of our members. And so if you want to keep your license, you're going to have to go get retrained in how to like social media behavior and what is or is not appropriate. And instead of Peterson going, okay, and having like even a fleeting fractional moment of self-reflection, just like a little moment of like, oh, the professional organization that I am part of is reprimanding me for my behavior. Perhaps I should do a little bit of soul searching and think about myself as an individual and how I'm handling myself and the conduct that I carry with myself. Instead of that, he decides to launch a free speech campaign against the College of Ontario Psychologists and takes it to the Ontario courts. The Ontario courts promptly tell him the College of Ontario Psychologists have the right to regulate their members and hold them to a code of conduct. The weirdos and strange boys who are pretending like this is a free speech issue at all essentially are saying out loud in front of you that they are completely cool with some weird guy posting like cock-milking porn on Twitter while sitting down with your 5-year-old kid in a room by yourself. Right? Like, you 100% want an oversight committee for psychologists. You 100% want people who are looking at psychologists and saying, is this guy literally posting pornography of a niche bondage fetish and accusing the Chinese government of trying to inflict that? Donald just embarrassing himself in the chat again. Welcome, Donald. Glad to see you. You're literally defending a guy who just lost a major case against... the Supreme Court didn't even hear it. The Supreme Court took one look at it and said, meh. Because Jordan Peterson is demented. Obviously demented. And what's embarrassing... Sorry, guys, my OBS studio is just disconnecting and reconnecting repeatedly. Hopefully it's not totally messing. So Peterson, what's so embarrassing about this for Peterson is that he's leaning right in to the like Democrat critique of the right, which is that they've just become a bunch of weirdos. Like, it's extremely weird that Peterson is trying to take this to the Supreme Court. It's extremely strange that Peterson is actually attempting to make this a free speech issue when it isn't. Like, when it isn't a free speech issue at all. And the people who are trying to defend Peterson, right, are really just revealing that the entire thing is, like, as strange as it gets. Like, when did our society become so kind of depraved and delusional? When did our society become this, like, absolutely, oh, it's totally fine for professionals to tell people to kill themselves. It's totally normal. Right? It's completely normal. When did that happen? And in my perspective, like, Peterson should have his license revoked. He should not be a practicing psychologist. Given like, look at what he's done for like the smallest possible punishment. Literally, he has to take like a weekend course, and instead of just doing it like everybody else, like all of the normal people, right? Sorry, Donald, but Jordan Peterson says a lot of facts. Like what? Like clean your room and you'll feel better? Okay, whoopity-doo. Something literally my grandma said? Okay. Like, just pretty embarrassing generally. Padre Krisabaki over on Twitch says Peterson still practices. He still is a licensed psychologist. I don't know if he practices, but he still is a licensed psychologist, and he shouldn't be. Like, he just shouldn't be. How's Milo? Eating peanut butter. Having a good time. Donald, what's always funny about you is anytime I ask for an example, you just don't have one. Like, it's just kind of embarrassment upon embarrassment, right? Padre says license is just a reward. No, a license is the ability to actually practice. It's the ability to be considered a professional. Right? And Peterson should just not be a psychologist anymore. Like, he's just obviously not credible. And moreover, doesn't care about his credibility anymore. And doesn't care about the credibility of the institutions that he's supposed to represent. Right? Like, Peterson is like the hallmark of capital. That he sacrificed everything for money. That he got involved with the Daily Wire and got involved with Ben Shapiro and all these guys for money. He became a climate change denialist for money. Donald says his take on feminism. Peterson is illiterate on the subject of feminism. His videos of anxiety, depression, how psychology works. No, this is the big problem with defenders of Jordan Peterson, is that they think he's a genius, but Peterson isn't even well respected in his own field. Right? Like, it's not like he's like extremely well published and extremely well regarded in his own field. It's not like everybody's being like, oh, well, Jordan Peterson, here's a Jordan Peterson quote, as Jordan Peterson says. Right? Nah. Like, near as I can tell in the psychology profession, people give him about a C. Like, he gets kind of like a passing grade. The reason why Peterson has risen to prominence is because he was well funded. He was well funded by capitalist backers who like the message that he puts forward. Because the message that he puts forward gaslights people into individualism, right? Like, there's nothing fundamentally wrong about saying, like, hey, clean up your room, right? Go work out. Like, you'll feel better, right? That's all fine. And there's nothing wrong about that. But when you try to make that, like, a worldview, when you try to pretend like that's the worldview of everything, it fails. Obviously, for obvious reasons. Donald writes, because he doesn't want to talk about his hunky boyfriend, Jordan Peterson, anymore. What do you think about the North Korean Yeonmi Park? She's a shill. She's a CIA shill, obviously. Like, she... some of the stuff that she said is just stupid. Like, when she was on Joe Rogan, she said some stuff that was just objectively stupid. And that if anybody believed it... Like, if you believe half the things that she says, I really, really got to tell you, you should probably stop buying in. Like, you should probably just stop participating. Like, Yeonmi Park is obviously a liar. She literally sat on Joe Rogan's podcast and talked about how, like, the North Koreans would push a train to the destination. And it's like, that, she was nervous. She's a liar. Like, she's a fraudulent liar, obviously. And the word is obviously. Like, basic logic, basic sense should tell you very plainly that she is lying. Like, you don't need to debunk it. It's just so, like, why would the North Koreans push the train? It doesn't make any fucking sense. The whole thing is totally bullshit, right? Like, please, for the love of God, have an iota of an iota. Like, a little tiny, itty-bitty, just the smallest smattering of skepticism instead of just immediately gobbling up all the propaganda you possibly can and just being like, yeah, that's how it is in North Korea. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, come on. Like, this is what makes these conversations so difficult. This is what's made these conversations so difficult, is that you guys are too fucking gullible. Like, way too fucking gullible. The absolute total nonsense that you're willing to just uncritically absorb and just absolutely gobble up. So do you know what happens to defectors? Right? Do you know what happens to them? So the CIA gives them $100,000 to defect, right? And then once the defector comes in, they get the $100,000. They're handed a script. Many of them are literally on record being like, I had no idea my country was doing these things. Yeah, you had no idea your country was doing these things, right? You had no idea that they were doing these things because they weren't. You weren't experiencing them in North Korea. And then when you took the money that the CIA is offering, the $100,000 that the CIA is offering, and then you just read the script, and the CIA let you keep your $100,000. Like, please. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. Like, I'm begging you. Have even the most modest amount of skepticism. Like, you are dealing with a country, you are dealing with a society that is overtly fraudulent. You think there's a machine of CIA recruiting North Koreans? Yes. Like, no, I don't think. The CIA outright it says so. Like, they outright say so. Like, what's so strange to me, Donald? Like, what's so unusual about this conversation is that you're looking at an organization with like a $500 billion budget. We don't actually know how big the CIA budget is because it's national security and all of that kind of stuff. But it must be at least $500 billion. Like, this enormous, massive organization that literally has so much money that they overthrow governments. That they literally overthrow governments. Where? CIA.gov. They have a website. Like, my man. I'm like this close to just getting rid of you. Like, you're more trouble than you're worth. Like, you're not intelligent. Like, it's brutal talking to you. Like, please have even the most modest amount of like self-awareness. Like, the ability to think properly. Maybe be like, an organization that actively overthrows governments, that actively destroys countries, that actively assassinates leaders, that literally attempted a coup in the Democratic People's Republic of Congo, right? That literally did that this year. That just is trying another coup in Venezuela. That is overthrowing governments all over the world, and is actively involved. That literally got us into the Iraq War. That maybe, perhaps. They would also do the same kind of thing against countries they explicitly call their enemies. Like it's just gotten obvious. Like, this is the part about it that is just so blisteringly difficult to comprehend, is that it's gotten obvious. Like, it's just smacking you in the face just every day, and you're just walking around being like, the CIA are good guys. The CIA is on our side. The CIA are actually helping us. Like, they literally put a gun against your head, and you're just like, I love the CIA. They're our friends and allies. Like, it's just wild to see this. It's just the strangest, most unusual thing to watch an entire society of people just blunder forward, believing that these extremist terrorist organizations like the CIA are somehow at all, even remotely, even a tiny, tiny little bit, even a tiny, 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 tiny little bit interested in helping you. Like, they're not interested in helping you. Padre says, Google says this. Okay. Google. Okay, gotcha. Padre says, you have this poster with the chakra. Do you do yoga? Yoga is part of the practices that I do, yeah. I wouldn't say that I'm like a yogi head or anything like that, but I really keep this poster up here to remind me, to remind me to go through my emotional practice. Oh, sorry guys, my dog's caught. One second, sorry. You good? You good, buddy? Oh, cough. Good boy, buddy. The big reason I pay attention to what to the chakra system is because it reminds me that we're primarily emotional creatures. Like, we're primarily emotional creatures. And the chakra system is a system that helps you go through your emotional self and to deal with your emotional self in a very straightforward, dispassionate kind of manner, right? So it's and I could go into it if you like. I do like talking about it. It's something that I talk about fairly regularly on the stream. But really, fundamentally, what it's about is it's about taking a look at yourself, like doing the work, doing the self-analysis of who am I, what am I doing here, what is the point of my existence. And acknowledging your emotions, acknowledging your emotional self, and dealing with those emotions, right? And I think lots of people just exist in the world and are not dealing with their emotions and are not dealing with their emotional self. Like, the hardest thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves. There's nothing harder, right? Like, that's why I have absolutely no respect whatsoever for people like Peterson, who play this game of like, oh, you're not doing that, so you must be lazy, or, well, you gotta stand up straight with your shoulder. Like, dealing with yourself is the hardest thing to do. And, like, a homeless man is working just as hard as Michael Jordan, right? He's just working really hard at staying alive in homelessness, whereas Michael Jordan is working really hard at putting a ball in a hoop. And for some reason, one is respected and the other isn't. So, yeah, Nebulous Transient over on Twitch is kind of going through the numbers. Yeah, dude, like, Google isn't going to tell you what the CIA budget is. Like, Google works with the CIA. Yeah. Long Defiant points out, South Korea fertility rate is 0.3. Capitalism sucks. Capitalism sucks because it doesn't fuck. Amazing. Exhale writes, Google works with the CIA. Yeah, of course. Like, the very existence of Google. I read a big long article on this stream maybe about 6 months ago. It's not well spread around or anything, but like, the very existence of Google came about because of funding from the CIA and like from the State Department. Like, the United States government is heavily interested in controlling the internet. Like, We got a fellow over on Twitch. The classic communism doesn't work, except it does every single time. If you read Michael Parenti's, Black Shirts and Reds, he really goes through it, right? Like communism has been successful every single time it's been tried, right? Maybe it hasn't been successful at enriching Elon Musk. Right? Maybe it's not successful at making Bill Gates rich. It's not successfully erecting Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. Right? It's not successfully ensuring that a class of psychopaths earn more wealth while you work your life away for them. Right? It's not successful at doing that. That's correct. Right? But it is successful at raising literacy rates, eliminating homelessness, alleviating poverty, ensuring that everyone has access to health care. Right? Like, for goodness sakes, on the screen right now, I have a quote. Cuban wrestler Mijan Lopez wins his 5th gold in his 5th Olympics, first in Beijing in 2008. He says, "I have to thank our commander-in-chief, Fidel Castro, and the Cuban Revolution for this result." Total failure, right? Like, complete collapse, utter disaster, right? Like, what you are experiencing, and I respect it because it's ubiquitous. Like there's a huge amount of money that is put towards propagandizing Americans. Like the McCarthy era was real, and the just getting it drilled into your mind that communism doesn't work, to the point where you never actually ask for the evidence. You never actually ask yourself, wait, can I see the evidence? It's just everybody around you just understands it. It's just a normal thing that everybody understands. Communism doesn't work. I'm a free thinker. Well, the moment you actually take a look at it, the moment you actually ask for evidence, the moment you start to say, hey, can I actually take a look at the countries that enacted communist ideas or socialist ideas? What was happening before and what happened after? And universally, in a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of formula, countries before they had socialist or communist leaders were way worse off than after those communist or socialist leaders. I'm going to just call you Jai. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Continues. Communism doesn't work, so much so every time a country gets destroyed, they need capitalism to rebuild it again. Just kind of an embarrassing comment, dude. Like, it's just like a total embarrassment. Like, you're basically omitting the capitalist aggression, right? Like when the Nazis destroy the Soviet Union, right? Or like when the sanction regime on Cuba happens. Like, you just don't these just don't exist in your mind. Like the carpet bombing of Vietnam or the carpet bombing of Korea, right? Like these just don't play in your mind, right? Padre, I'm just going to happily ban you. I just don't need disingenuous bad actors in my chat. Simple as that. Like I'm here to have genuine conversation and change hearts and minds. I'm really not interested in somebody cluttering my chat with nonsense. Yeah, socialism doesn't work, and when it does work, then that's capitalism. Yeah, it is just like a religious ideology at this point, right? If it's good, it's capitalism, and if it's bad, it's communism, right? And evidence doesn't matter in this regard. Yeah, Long Defiant writes, that's honestly how I became an atheist. All the Christians around me were complaining about atheism, so I checked it out. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Christian fundamentalism is so off the rails. Like, I go so far as to say that there's no such thing as a Christian in America. Like, these people don't care about Christ. Like, it's easy to denounce Christianity, and it's easy, I think, to be in the atheist position when you're surrounded by these guys. Like, they don't read their book. They don't care about their Christ. They certainly don't act like Christ. They don't care at all. Yeah. Nebulous Transient literally just posting worldbank.org, 800 million people out of poverty new report. I'm not going to click on that link for obvious reasons, Nebulous, but like the evidence is overwhelming. Like it's insane to me that when socialist countries or when countries that are striving towards communism make these great achievements, it's literally just ignored. Like just straight up, like billions of people's lives have been improved and it's just ignored. It's wild. Like America is so heavily propagandized. It's just so heavily propagandized. I don't think that there is a more heavily propagandized country than the United States, because the people in America literally just regurgitate buzzwords, and they don't actually have thoughts. It's pretty wild to watch. Jai continues, because socialism on its own is a failed system. No society ever before Marx has organized... So first of all, because socialism on its own is a failed system, clearly false. Like, literally all the evidence shows that you're wrong. But again, I don't think I'm talking to somebody who cares that much about evidence. No society ever before Marx is organized in such a way, because it simply can't. You literally are illiterate. Like, straight up, you haven't read anything. Marx did a lot of investigation and a lot of work on exactly that question. He called it primitive communism and really showed pretty nakedly that communist societies are the default for human species. That's how we started. And that things like private property, things like monarchies come out of systems of domination and control, right? Like, you end up with a state and you end up with these apparatus, like a group of men take over the food supply and then they withhold that food from people unless you work for them. Like, that's how capitalist systems or monarchical systems or empire or feudal systems come into place. That's how slave systems come into place. Just a group of thugs take control of everything and withhold it, right? But there's a bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of evidence that shows, like First Nation societies, there's all kinds of I keep saying anthropomorphized, and that's wrong. Anthropological evidence to show that people lived in close-knit communal living. For goodness sakes, we were just talking about Christians. The Christians during the Roman Empire were organizing themselves into communes. Like, this claim that no society has done it is just born of illiteracy. It's just a claim that you make because you don't know any better, and nobody around you has ever challenged you on it, because everybody around you is just as propagandized as you are. So to continue the comment, we've learned lessons since mercantilism that we need a system of control. This is sounding more and more fascist. Oh my God, I get free education. I get that. You just have a sharp... I mean, yeah, education should be free. It's embarrassing that it isn't. The fact that we don't have an open education system... I don't like the word free education system because that shuts people's brains down. But an open education system, it's a major reason why we don't actually move forward as a society, right? That education is for the rich, and the education system is designed to basically propagandize you into the system of capital, right? Which we're seeing very clearly is in this rapid decline. We're literally watching a stock market crash right now happen because the system of capital can't solve its problems, and is actually alienating itself very badly from the rest of the world. You just have a sharp critique about capitalism and a fantasy-like mind. I mean, you don't know anything about me, but that's okay. But that thinks equality is a thing. Well, equality means different things to different people. right? Like a fascist like yourself probably thinks that we're talking about equality being like, I get a loaf of bread and you get a loaf of bread. Whereas communists understand that equality is the equality is that we are equally valid in our existences, that we have the equality of validity. That just because you might be disabled or old or less capable than someone else doesn't mean that you're less valid as a human being. Doesn't mean that your existence has less validity to the society. Right? That this misunderstanding, I feel like, is done on purpose. So to kind of create a straw man argument about what communism is actually talking about. Because you're not actually interested in learning anything. Which is pretty clear. Yeah, different efforts, different rewards. Not everybody will be as productive. Right. Karl Marx said, for each according to their ability, from each according to their need. Right? Again, if you actually read Marx, if you actually knew what you were talking about, you would understand this. Somebody will be down, somebody will be up, somebody will be one worker, someone will be an owner. Therein lies the difference. Right? Now you just sound like an apologist for feudalism. Right? There will always be a king. There will always be a serf. Right? Like, during the divine right of rule, people thought that it was an inevitability too. Well, that turned out to be false. How does an owner maintain ownership? Serious question. Through the violence of the state. And by ownership, as you are being defining it in a binary relationship, as being the ability to control the produce. And by ownership, as you are defining it in a binary relationship, as being the ability to control the produce of someone else's work. Yeah, I mean, it all starts by a bunch of violent men showing up and, like, grabbing people, tearing them off the land, right, throwing them into factories, throwing them down mine shafts, basically saying, do this or you don't eat, right, withholding food, withholding shelter, right, this is the beginning of capitalism, this is how this worked. This is the Industrial Revolution. And people were basically told, work or starve. Right? So when people are given that option of work or starve, they work. Right? That's how it goes. And of course, the major issue with capitalism is that it ends up in this kind of dead end, where all of your productivity goes into the hands of a small group of psychopaths who are protected by the violence of the state. And these small group of psychopaths eventually just want more and more and more profit for themselves and are interested in reducing your wages, interested in raising prices, to the point where you can no longer buy the goods in your society. And so the whole system stops working, right? Because you have these worthless parasites who do nothing, who are not valuable. Like a guy like Warren Buffett is the least valuable citizen. Like literally a homeless man begging for change on the side of the street is more important than Warren Buffett. But Warren Buffett is given all of this prominence because he has all the fake dollars, right? That we ourselves are responsible for printing. Like it's just absolutely wild. Like, Warren Buffett produces nothing, does nothing, is not important whatsoever. If he were to be gone from the system today, no one would notice or care. He is utterly irrelevant. And yet, he is given primary prominence in the society. June writes, it goes without saying that in this respect, men are not equal. No sensible person and no socialist forgets this. But this kind of equality has nothing to do with socialism. If Mr. Tugin is quite unable to think, he is at least able to read. Where lie to lake the well-known work of one of the founders of scientific socialism, Frederick Engels, directed against Dühring, he would find there a special section explaining the absurdity of imagining that economic equality means anything else than the abolition of classes. But when professors set out to refute socialism, one never knows what to wonder at most. Their stupidity, their ignorance, or their unscrupulousness. Lenin. Yeah, that basically nails it. Like, when we talk about equality, we are not talking about everybody being the same height. Right? This sort of childish notion. And, like, it's this kind of childishness and illiteracy that is just plaguing our culture, just absolutely plaguing it. And that the people who double down on this illiteracy and who double down on this have this kind of like smirking, like self-congratulatory attitude about it. This very strange, like, haha, I dunked on the libs. And it's just like the most embarrassing thing you've ever seen in your life. As they say, the dumbest shit you've ever heard. Just crazy. Like, you hear Peterson talk this way. You hear Shapiro talk this way. You hear Crowder talk this way. You hear all these guys talk this way, and they're morons. And for some reason, they're popular. I don't understand that at all. Like, how is it that someone who is so fundamentally illiterate and stupid can be so popular? Like, it's just so baffling. And the only thing that I can think about is, like, yeah, capitalists have hundreds of billions of dollars. They can just flood the airwaves. Right, so people listen to these people because they're just there. There's like it's like how CNN has high ratings because they play in airports, you know. Kevin writes, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its mighty waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. Find out just what a people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." Frederick Douglass. Good quote. Good quote. And like, I actually have examples of this like very embarrassing worldview. Like, I don't really like to bring Ben Shapiro or these guys too often into the talk because they're so buffoonish. But now they're starting to actually like evoke communism and evoke socialism, and so I feel I have to respond. Here's Ben Shapiro posting the classic like Trojan horse meme that we've all seen 100 million times before. The horse is labeled Harris Walls, Joyi. Harris Walls Joy. I don't know what he's saying. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Harris Walls, and then inside are the soldiers of the Trojan horse, right? And that's socialism. And then the people who are pulling the horse in are the media. Elon Musk responds, but also there's a little horse inside the big horse hiding communism. Like, this is stupid, right? And these guys, Ben Shapiro and Elon Musk, are at the top of the media system, right? That Ben Shapiro operates on the far right of the media system. He is on top of that. Elon Musk literally owns Twitter. That these guys, for all their complaints of cancel culture and all of this, have some of the loudest voices in the society, and they are illiterate morons. That they are actually trying to convince people that Harris or Walls are somehow communists or even socialists, when it's really obvious that they are, like, at best, if you wanted to be charitable to them, you could call them liberals. Although any rational thinking society would essentially call them conservatives. That guys like Shapiro and Musk are so far to the right, are fascists. Like, let's just call it. Like, they're just fascists. Like, they're so hysterically far to the right that when they look at people who are basically like moderate conservatives, like people who maybe are slightly on the left spectrum within conservatism, they get called communists. We just skip right over liberal, right? We skip right over liberal. We skip right over centrist. We skip right over socialist. We skip right over democratic socialism. And we go just straight into communism. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. As embarrassing as this comment. Coming from Jai. Communism is all about beautiful talks and failed practices. I see you guys juggling to defend communist countries. Like, the Soviet Union literally came about from, like, a feudal agrarianism, and they were the first people into space. Like, I genuinely have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Like, that is how embarrassing this has gotten, right? Like, the Soviet Union took a group of people working fields as feudal serfs, and some of them as, like, straight up indentured servants and slaves, and took that society and turned it into the second largest industrial powerhouse, capable of defeating the Nazis and being the first people into space. I literally have no fucking idea what you're talking about. It's embarrassing what you're doing. Like, you're not convincing. And a major reason why you're not convincing is that you refuse to acknowledge reality because you don't know what it is. All you've ever done is listen to your dad and listen to propagandists jam down your face the idea that communism is bad. Well, you don't know anything about it. Like, you're literally in the chat trying to tell me about the subject when you're illiterate. Like, why should I believe a single thing you have to say? Why are you even commenting? It's odd and unusual that you have the confidence that you do in a subject that you know nothing about. Nebulous Transient. In the 2010s, China laid down more than twice the amount of concrete that single decade than the U.S. did in the entire 20th century. If you want to talk about Chinese advancement, like, you just got to talk about their solar panels, their high-speed rail system, right? Like, China is building at a rate that is just absolutely embarrassing the West. And right now, they are... the United States is actually flipping out about it because they don't know how to act or what to do. Right? All the United States can do, and all the capitalist class has ever done, is go to war. Right? They don't know how to solve problems. And certainly not in this moment where we're being led by just religious fanatics, essentially, right? Where capitalism has ceased to be even interested in abiding by any kind of reality whatsoever, and that the people who are at the top of the chain are now just religious fundamentalists for capitalism. And here's an article from Code Pink. The U.S. is preparing for an unwinnable war against China. Written by Megan Russell. In war, there are no winners. And in a war between the United States and China, the entire war would lose. That's not just considering the mass loss of life that would occur, but also the reverberating effects of war that would sink millions into economic devastation, destroy the environment, and lead to widespread displacement and human rights atrocities. The potential use of nuclear weapons is often disregarded as a side note, but it shouldn't be. According to experts, conflict between the United States and China could easily escalate into nuclear war, and a nuclear winter isn't much further away. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown, disagrees. He says he is fully confident that the U.S. would defeat China if war were to break out over Taiwan, even though the Commission on National Defense Strategy predicts extreme losses on the U.S. side. Just last week he announced, it's going to take all the nation if we go to conflict with the PRC, and I'm confident, if we're challenged, we will be there. I play to win, he continued, after acknowledging that these will be major conflicts akin to what we saw in World War II, and so we've got to come to grips with that. Born in 1962, General Brown knows nothing of the horrors of World War II. For him, it's words in a textbook, a game to play. For others, it will be lost limbs and terror. The U.S. has been in near constant conflict since its inception, and our more recent wars paint an obvious vision of ineptitude. The only things Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan accomplished were widespread death and destruction. Violence does not end just because war does, but hangs over communities like a specter, negatively affecting the health and economic well-being of nations, as well as contributing to environmental harm. While our government has been edging us towards war with China for some time, it's not often we hear the words spoken so starkly. General Brown's point is clear. The U.S. is preparing for war, and they're not holding back. This week, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin brought $500 million to the Philippines to boost their military capabilities, while Secretary of State Antony Blinken was negotiating a deal to move U.S. operational control of Japanese forces from Hawaii to Japan. Make no mistake, this is not another small play of some faraway war game. This is a big deal. Having operational control over Japan's military means our government doesn't need to send as many American soldiers across the ocean to engage in battle. They'll have full command and control of thousands of Japanese troops to do with as they please. The U.S. already has operational control over South Korea's military, meaning that if war broke out, all ROK troops would be placed under U.S. command as well. This isn't just about war strategy. It's about public perception. The American people are far more likely to support a war when they aren't losing loved ones left and right. That might be the only lesson our government learned from Vietnam, and Iraq only solidified it. Drones and special forces won't cut it in a war with China, which is why the U.S. is working overtime to solidify military partnerships across the Asia-Pacific. Modern U.S. war waging often occurs through the use of proxy states and funding the troops of another country as long as they act in U.S. interests. They'll call it military strategy, but at the very root of it, you'll find a dark feeling of indifference towards the citizens of other nations. Our government could not care less what happens to innocent people in Japan, South Korea, or the Philippines. As long as U.S. global hegemony is preserved, they will let them die. Meanwhile, opposition has been growing within. In South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines, protests are on the rise, calling for an end to U.S. imperialism. The people don't want to be cannon fodder between the United States and China, which is exactly what will happen if the situation escalates into war. At a Foreign Relations Committee hearing last week on strategic warfare with China, the 7th so far, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell stressed the importance of AUKUS and other trilateral partnerships when dealing with China. This will be never ending, Campbell told the committee, emphasizing that the Asia-Pacific requires the most capable Navy and advanced long-range air capabilities that the United States has ever needed before. While alliances are being made, and billions of tax dollars continue to fund hyper-militarization of the region, General Brown even commented that he is accelerating the effort of stockpiling weapons, ammunition, and other supplies in the Asia-Pacific in preparation for war. Just a few months ago, a trilateral summit between Japan, the Philippines, and the United States deepened their military alliance in the region. Biden reaffirmed the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, which states the U.S. will respond to any attack on the island nation. AUKUS, which Secretary Campbell repeatedly stressed the importance of, is a defense alliance between the U.S., the U.K., and Australia in the Asia-Pacific region. Criticized by China for its Cold War mentality, the strategic partnership is not unlike those that led us into global wars during the 20th century. Everywhere we look, our government speaks of war with China as if it is an inevitable and warranted endeavor. It is not. War never is. And yet the media will continue to follow our politicians like lapdogs and feed the narrative that war with China is unavoidable, even though China itself has repeatedly denounced any potential escalation into conflict. At this point, it rests on the soldiers of the people to say otherwise. It's time for the American public to take a stand against the normalization of conflict and the preparation for war with China. It's time to tell our government that war with China is not only unacceptable, but global suicide. We now stare this unwinnable conflict in the face, and there's no time to look away. The time for action is now. Megan Russell is Code Pink's China is Not Our Enemy campaign coordinator. She graduated from the London School of Economics with a master's degree in conflict studies. Prior to that, she attended NYU, where she studied conflict, culture, and international law. Megan spent 1 year studying in Shanghai and over 8 years studying Chinese Mandarin. Her research focuses on the intersection between U.S.-Chinese affairs, peace building, and international development. Uh, hey, Jai, just stop talking like you know what you're talking about. Maybe start just asking some questions, okay? Like, you're obviously not literate. Like, really, 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 my man. Like, you're acting like you can stand toe to toe, and I'm outright calling you out. You don't know what you're talking about. Please start asking questions. Stop pretending like you actually know anything about the subject. Right? You're just cosplaying. And it's really, really obvious. Okay? Like, it's really, really obvious. So start asking questions or I'm just going to get rid of you. Because I don't need people pretending like they know things when they're obviously illiterate. Just me, good to see you. Don't forget to hey chat, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, give John more money, support his Patreon. Thanks, Just Me. I appreciate that. Generation Y Me, good to see you. June writes, the kind of socialism under which everyone would receive the same pay, an equal quantity of meat, an equal quantity of bread, would wear the same kind of clothes and receive the same kind of goods in equal quantities. Such a kind of socialism is unknown to Marxism. Stalin. Kevin writes, fascists are afraid that all people, regardless of race or ethnicity, will wake up to the fact that hate, division, and greed are not in their best interests. Yeah. Fiddleford over on Twitch writes, socialism is the vehicle of transition, just as the cocoon is the vehicle of transition of the caterpillar. The caterpillar is capitalism. Socialism does not sublate capitalism. It is the vehicle which is the sublation. Yeah, nebulous transient. Like, people in the chat are actually responding to Jai, which I highly suggest you don't. Like, my suggestion, right, my advice to anybody out there, oh, well, Generation Y Me with a $5 donation, if you insist. Thank you, Generation Y Me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. My advice to anybody out there who is beginning their journey in communism or who wants to speak against communism is to genuinely sit down and ask yourself, in seriousness, what do I actually know about this subject? Right? Have you ever actually read Capital? Have you actually ever read the Communist Manifesto? Have you ever actually read the Principles of Communism? If the answer is no, well, then you probably don't know anything about communism. And that's fine. It's completely fine to not know anything about a subject. That's completely fine. But when you gallivant around pretending like you know something about the subject, when it is just patently obvious that you don't, right? Well, you just end up making yourself look like a fool. That the wisest position is to just say, and you can say it right now to yourself in this moment, and there's no shame in it. There's no shame in it at all. You can say to yourself in this moment, right now, I don't know anything about communism. All I've ever heard about communism has come from its enemies. And if you say that to yourself, then you can actually begin your journey from a position of honesty. And you can actually honestly say, okay, well, what about this concern that I have? What about this concern that I have? And then you can actually begin to hear rebuttals and hear different positions and absorb those positions and absorb those things. But if you're going to pretend like you're an expert to people who know more than you do about the subject, you're just going to go nowhere. It's just going to go nowhere. DM writes, good to see you, by the way, DM. Good evening, John. Could the world stock market decline this past week be a red herring or a trial run for something more spectacular, like an all-out apocalyptic Wall Street crash, ending the US dollar as we know it, and ending North American capitalism, as many of us would like to see and witness? I cannot stress this enough, but capitalist America, ruled by sociopath oligarchs, truly deserve its decline and collapse. In my honest opinion, a new world communist order is long overdue. Let's get it done. So the economic decline in the stock market, or the stock market decline that we've seen, essentially what is happening is the political class of America is realigning itself against China. That they are essentially going to the capitalists within America, saying you can no longer invest in China, you can no longer invest in Chinese businesses, and because China has China is heavily integrated in the world economy, and because China has a population of 1.4 or 1.5 billion people, this means that capitalists are in a position where they have to transition out of these markets, and they don't really have anywhere else to move their money. They don't have anywhere to transition to. And so the result is a decline in the value of the stocks, right? A decline in the value of all of this stuff. And that what it really heralds is coming conflict. That the American empire is trying to decouple itself from China so that when it begins its war of aggression against China, it won't experience huge, enormous economic decline. But, of course, the American empire is facing many difficulties along that front, right? Like, where do they get their goods from? Who's going to manufacture anything, right? Like, the America is facing, like, major problems. And is, and so I view this stock market decline and its potential crash, its potential for that, as the herald of war between America and China, and also it is the the most embarrassing thing about capitalists is that they seem to espouse this thing that says capitalism is innovative. There's no more innovative system than the system of capital. Capitalist systems are heavily disincentivized to innovate. They're heavily disincentivized to do research and development. That the only type of research that a capitalist wants is one where there's profit guaranteed at the end of it. That's literally not how research and development works. And so the only time the American society or any society experiences forward momentum in regards to innovation is when there is resources given with no expectation of outcome, right? Like during World War II or on the lead up to World War II, like there wasn't an expectation of outcome for many of the things that were discovered. And we discovered many things were discovered during that period of time that just happened because we took a group of people and put them in a room and said, just fuck around. Just fuck around with all this stuff. Figure shit out. And then they would figure something out and they would show it to somebody and somebody would go, hey, you know what I think I could use that for? Right? Is the combination of just inventors fucking around in rooms with materials and then showing the results of their things to military personnel, and the military personnel going, you know what? I think that there's a use there. You know what? I think there's something to it. Like, the position of the capitalist is that they want you to know what it is you're inventing before you have invented it, right? They want you to already have finished the end result before you've even begun the process of researching it. It's just literally not how it actually works. It's just straight up not how it works. And so capitalist societies, when they fall into this free market solution nonsense in regards to how to research, they go nowhere, right? Because there's no profit in it, no obvious profit in it. And so I'm afraid that the shifting that you're seeing in the stock market is just the billionaire class getting ready for war with China and essentially hoarding their resources. And of course there's some talk about, as the market declines, Buffett will turn around and buy a bunch of stocks on the cheap, right? Because these guys are the guys that actually own the economy at this point. Like, the fact that there is such a thing as an individual who can move the market, it's dumb. That's a dumb idea. It's a dumb outcome. Nebulous Transient continues. market exchange extends back into antiquity, whereas capitalism is a historical phenomenon grounded materially in social, cultural, political, material productive reality of feudalism's death rattle. Yeah, I mean, it really... Donald writes, can you react to the video Ben Shapiro explain why communism is evil? No, for a couple of reasons. One, it'll demonetize this stream, so I'm disincentivized to do that. But also, B, Ben Shapiro is illiterate and a liar, so there's just no point. Like, he just lies. Just as simple as that. So I don't need to do a whole video to be like, Ben Shapiro's lying, right? And his lies are cartoonish. Like, they're clumsy. Like, and obviously rooted in illiteracy. Like, is there a point that you would like me to talk about? Or you can ask a simple question, but I'm not going to spend any amount of time responding to, like, an obvious, flagrant, overwhelming fraud and liar like Ben Shapiro. Like, the guy believes magic is real, for Christ's sakes. Like, I just don't know why people take this guy seriously anymore. He literally stands in front of you and says that he believes the Bible was written by God. It's a clown. He's just a clown. Yeah, Fiddleford writes, work itself is inventive, of course. Hey, Joe, how you doing, bud? You should be sorry you're late, Joe. I was deeply offended. I couldn't believe that you weren't here right away. Yeah, but his wife's a doctor. Cool. Then we should listen to his wife. Like, I don't know, dude. Like, I just don't. If you want to see, I think the best take I've seen on Ben Shapiro, you want to find Cody Johnston of Some More News. He talks about Ben Shapiro and basically points out that Ben Shapiro's brand is facts don't care about your feelings, but no one is more hysterically emotionally driven than Ben Shapiro. Like, no one is more hysterically emotional than Ben Shapiro. He is a deeply, deeply unserious person and extremely dumb. Like, and not aware of it. Like, there's this great John Cleese quote that says, the problem with very stupid people is that they're so stupid they don't know how stupid they are. And that's Ben Shapiro. And he literally will say, I don't know why people are complaining about raising water. People will just sell their property and move. And, like, oblivious to the idea that, like, to who, Ben? To whom is it that people are going to sell their property to, do you think, Ben? And, like, he's been saying that for so long. He said it on Joe Rogan, for God's sakes. It's like, and it's so obviously a dumb thing to say. Like, it's so obviously a dumb thing to say. Like, this is what's gotten so strange about this discourse. And so one of the things that I'm actually kind of glad has happened with the Democrats recently, although Kamala Harris is still a genocide apologist and still supports genocide and is still a maniac, right? She's a cop. But their new tactic against the Republicans of just being like, you guys are fucking weird, right? I'm really, really glad that that's taking hold, and I'm really glad that's happening, because it's really creating a cultural space where people like me basically get to say, like, it's so strange that the most obvious dumbasses you've ever seen in your life, just the biggest morons you've ever seen. Like, Ben Shapiro is dumb. He is the opposite of smart. He is unintelligent. And yet he is lauded as this, like, thinker and, like, a guru. He's a moron. Like, he thinks magic is real. Just, like, dumb. Eric, how are you doing, my man? I feel like I haven't seen you in a long time. I hope things are going well for you, Eric. I know that you've been on the upswing recently. Eric writes, hey, John, what's your opinion of Tim Walz? Tim Walz is the new vice presidential candidate of the Democratic Party under Kamala Harris. I'll take two tacks on this, okay? Tack number one, I think tactically speaking, like from a strategic perspective of the Democrats, he's an excellent choice. He's an excellent choice because it's very clear that the strategy from the Democrats is, let's put forward someone who looks cuddly, right? Oh, he gave school lunches to children, right? They're really going to play up his, like, cuddly teddy bear, lovable, like, oh, look, he's hugging a kid and we don't think he's trying to fuck that kid, right? Like, they're really trying to play that element up. And strategically, I think it's a win. Like, fundamentally, if the critique coming out of the Democrats is that the Republicans are weird, right, and they are, well, that implies that the Democrats are normal. And so they are going to play that up. They're going to play up the, look at how weird these guys are and look how normal we look. Like, they're even willing to be like, sure, you might critique our policies, or sure, you might have that kind of thing. We might have some disagreements, but you can't disagree with the fact that we look way more normal. Like, we don't look like a bunch of oddball, creepy losers, right? The way that the Republicans do, universally. Like, your Ben Shapiro's, your Jordan Petersons, your Donald Trumps, your Matt Gaetz. Like, all of these guys look like creepy fucking weirdos. Because they are creepy fucking weirdos. And meanwhile, like, if you just look at Harris and you look at Tim Walz and you look at the Democrats, right, they don't look like creepy weirdos. That you got to go a little bit deeper, be like, oh yeah, they don't look like creepy weirdos. They still support genocide. They still do, like, dumb fuck shit all the time. They're still obviously corporate psychopaths, which leads me into my second line about Tim Walz, which is that he's a Zionist, right? Like, he's a Zionist. So that means that all of his cuddly teddy bearness is just cynical. It's just a cynical ploy to gain prominence and power. That's all it is. There are many different strategies to attain power. There are many roads to power. And Tim Walz's road to power is just be like a Winnie the Pooh cuddly teddy bear boy, right? Just be nice. I'll give people, like, classic liberalism, right? Like, I'll give people a 2% increase over 50 years on one line, and that'll garner their support, and that'll mean that they'll turn a blind eye when I support a genocide in Gaza, right? Like, that's a tactic. That's a strategy that liberals use, and it works. That's the reason they use it. And it's especially effective if your opponent is this creepy, crazed, raving, foaming at the mouth lunatic that's talking about needing to see your kids' genitals before they can play volleyball. Right? Like, it's pretty easy to be a liberal right now. But the thing is that because the discourse has gotten so weird and so fucked up and, like, literally, like, Lucifer adjacent, like, straight up just like, we gotta be taking a look at your kids' genitals. We need a dress code. We're really worried about trans athletes in sports, so much so that when a woman trounces other women, we accuse her of being a trans person, even though she fucking isn't. Just the most embarrassing shit you've ever seen in your life. But because that's become the normal discourse, that's become the day-to-day discourse, when a regular, normal, just not at all outside the mainstream liberal shows up and is like, hi, I support all foreign interventionist wars. I'm just as genocidal as anybody else. I might be more genocidal than many of the Republicans. I support increasing the salary of police across America. I think that we should erect fortresses all across America, that we should ensure that crime and punishment. Like, Kamala Harris is running to the right of the Republicans on the crime issue. Like, that, like, yeah, we got to build a border wall. Like, this kind of fucking crazy nonsense shit. We're going to deport those Muslims. Like, But Tim Wall shows up and goes, yeah, but we're going to make sure that kids in grade 8 can have school lunches, right? And because people are so used to dealing with these narcissistic, demented psychopaths who are just straight up mask off, well, if you don't like that, go vote for Trump. Like, just straight up, like, impoverishing children means I get to have an orgasm with the hooker I fucked tonight level of political discourse. When a guy shows up and does, like, the most bare bones, smallest possible, yes, children should eat food. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense that children should be nourished. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Jesus Christ has come back. He's the saint of all that has ever been and all that ever will be. And then the people on the right are just like, he's a communist. Look at him giving food to children that one time. Like a communist would. It's just fucking dumb. And the fact that it's working, the fact that it's effective, the fact that instantaneously the discourse has now become vote blue no matter who. Right? We're back to vote blue no matter who. Because instead of it being demented old man Joe who's doing a genocide, now it's you didn't just fall out of a coconut tree, and guy that gives lunch to kids that one time. Right? And just is immediately changed the discourse completely. And yet when genocide protesters stand up in front of Kamala, right? Like, here's a great, I've had this on the screen for a little while. This is from Q Anthony Ali, at Noble Q Ali. This district's nearby this campaign stop is home to the highest concentration of Palestinian Americans and Lebanese Americans in the country. And this is how Kamala speaks to them. The day after footage of IDF soldiers raping a prisoner went viral. Enjoy the next 3 months. And of course, here's the quote. If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking. Kamala Harris in Detroit tonight. Like, what the Harris-Walz campaign is really showing is that Americans don't care about politics. They just care about looking good. That's all. They don't care about what they do. Right? They don't care at all. They just care about how they look. And like, if you're outside of America, if you're any other country looking at America, you're looking at this interaction going like, yikes, 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 yikes. Yeah, Joe writes, Harris may win without uttering a word about policy. Yeah, it's just feelings. Generation Y Me wrote, Ben Shapiro said weird is a slur. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Like, that's a weird thing to say. Right? Like, Mr. Free Speech, Mr. I should be able to say the N-word with no consequences, is now saying that weird is a slur. Like, get out of here, dude. Like, you're just hysterical. Isaac writes, Edmund Gonzalez was a CIA who hunted liberation theology priests in the 80s, organized the killing of Bishop Romero and 6 Jesuit priests in El Salvador. Now he is elected president in Venezuela. He's not the elected president in Venezuela. It's another Juan Guaido situation, Isaac. Like, he wasn't elected the president in Venezuela. He's being appointed by the United States. But it's another Juan Guaido situation. It didn't work with Juan Guaido. I don't see why it's going to work with this guy. Eric writes, currently trying to find a job, my friend, and planning to go back to school in the fall. Also, I have to say, I got sucked into the whole girlfriend chat GPT AI lately. I have to say, it's quite fun playing around with the AI because you essentially create a whole story however you see fit. In one chat, I stir the AI so far to the left, I managed to create a Hunger Games scenario where the AI gets killed, but women are not aware of this reality. Meanwhile, the whole thing is playing live for the entertainment of the rich. What? Eric, what are you talking about, bro? Corporal Fly over on Twitch. Yeah, not the best response by Harris. Yeah, no kidding. Well, what's she supposed to say? Right? What she's supposed to say? Right? Like, she supports this genocide. She's going to go on board with it. Yeah. Test dolls rights. That's pretty sad. Winning an election without any policies. Yeah, that's pretty standard in American politics. Right? Like, Obama wins his election by basically just being like, hope and change. Right? He doesn't need to actually promise anything or do anything. He's just like, first black president, hope and change. Like, the campaign that Obama ran was actually the same campaign that McCain ran. Right? Hope and change. Right? Well, where's all this hopey changey we're talking about? So, here's a concerning story that should concern all of us. From The Intercept by Natasha Leonard. The outrageous case of a journalist charged with a hate crime for recording a Gaza protest action. This appears to be a clear attempt to stifle both journalistic activities and pro-Palestinian speech. In an egregious violation of press freedoms and First Amendment protected activity, a New York City video journalist was arrested on felony hate crime charges Tuesday for allegedly being present during and documenting a pro-Palestine protest action. According to the charges, Sam Seligson, a credentialed independent videographer, filmed a small group of people last June graffitiing the homes of the Brooklyn Museum's director, president, and 2 other museum officials with pro-Palestine, anti-Zionist slogans. Spray-painted messages and banners hung on the properties accused the museum leaders of complicity in Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. A week prior, the museum had called in police to mass arrest protesters who had assembled inside its building to demand divestment from holdings related to Israel's war. No one is suggesting that graffitiing private property is legal under New York law. Seligson is not accused of spray painting or vandalizing any property. He is, nonetheless, facing charges for criminal mischief enhanced as a felony hate crime. One other person, alleged to have driven participants to and from the executives' homes, is also facing criminal mischief hate crime charges. The police are still looking for 4 alleged participants. That a participant in the graffiti action would face criminal mischief charges comes as no surprise. To categorize the acts as a felony hate crime, however, is itself a troubling overreach. The home of Brooklyn Museum director Anne Pasternak was not targeted because she is Jewish, but because of the museum leadership's treatment of Gaza's solidarity protesters. The other homes targeted did not belong to Jewish people. Even those who might disagree with the nature of the tactics cannot reasonably claim that the action was targeting individuals for being Jewish. The targets of the homes of individuals in leadership roles in an institution that has been a site of anti-war protest. To suggest that Brooklyn Museum's ties to Israel and its military-industrial complex somehow confer Jewish identity on the institution's executives is a particularly offensive version of the common, pernicious conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. The reasons behind it, however, are clear. The hate crime charge is among countless repressive efforts to treat Palestinian solidarity as de facto anti-Semitism, and thus turn it into de jure anti-Semitism. The hate crime enhancement is bad enough. Applying the overreaching hate crimes charge to a journalist covering the incident is beyond troubling. It is an outrage. It is not alleged that he participated in the graffiti. He is accused of merely traveling with the participants and being present to document their activities. If he is being charged for being transported by these people to document the event, that's not a crime. That's journalism, said Robert Balin, an attorney who has represented photojournalists arrested by the NYPD during the George Floyd uprisings. Balin stressed that it's possible that more relevant information could emerge to complicate the story. But the facts are as they are being portrayed, which is that he did not actually participate in the underlying events. Bringing felony charges against him is very, very concerning. At this point, the prosecution has not even proven that Seligson was present, and Seligson and his attorney did not comment on whether he was. But he would hardly be the first video journalist to accompany people engaged in unlawful political or other activities, including graffitiing private property, for documentary purposes. A law enforcement official who spoke anonymously to the Associated Press conceded that Seligson was not directly involved with the spray painting or property damage, so there can be little doubt he is being charged for just documenting the act. According to Seligson's attorney, Lena Whitty, the criminal complaint against the journalist does not allege any specific behavior that is attributed to him outside of presence, which is absolutely consistent with his role as a journalist in documenting protests or other activities. The state has not provided any reliable evidence that he was actually there, Whitty told me, and even if he were there, they have not made any allegations that he engaged in any activity beyond mere presence. There is no law that requires journalists or any member of the public to act as police informers should they observe a crime. On the contrary, there is a particular public interest in ensuring the members of the press can respond to tips and cover stories without fear that they will in turn face prosecution for their continued presence. Indeed, the right to observe and record unlawful conduct without being considered complicit should not only be reserved for journalists. This is very alarming, wrote the advocacy group Freedom of the Press Foundation on X. Cops and prosecutors have dreamed up plenty of convoluted theories to criminalize journalism. The organization added that charging a reporter with a hate crime for documenting news has to be one of the most outrageous yet. Getting ready for it. Getting ready for it. No, Eric, I kind of understand what you're talking about with the AI stuff, but like, how deep you going, dude? You okay? You doing okay over there, bud? Generation YME says, wait, what building was spray painted? It sounds like they went after some houses, like the leaders of this organization. DM writes, Kamala is basically Hillary Clinton 2.0. The only quotes you'll hear from Kamala are as "we came, we saw," followed by a cackle and a giggle. Yeah, the current thing enjoyer. I have to believe you're being sarcastic, my man. I'm with her. Coconut tree, coconut. Yeah, Fiddleford, turncoat. Yeah, cop is worse than another form of clutch strader. Allah enforcement officials. The chuds would shake in their boots. Yeah. Conton writes, does anyone remember when conservatives and other liberals scare-peddled the idea that Muslims would make it illegal to criticize Islam, and now it's illegal to criticize Zionism? Yeah. Like, it's just getting to be cartoonish, right? Like, it's just getting to be cartoonish at this point. And it's tough to believe that there's still people who want to defend this shit. Like that's the part about it that's gotten quite strange and odd. It's just difficult. It's just difficult to believe that there's somebody genuinely bought into the idea that this is working. Right? Oh, hold on. We here at the Canadian Commie are always very prepared with all of our material all of the time. At no point are you going to watch us do any kind of internal organization to make sure that you get the news that is deserving for you. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe. Ensure that you donate to the Canadian Commie at patreon.com/thecanadiancommie. If you have a friend or a neighbor looking for a podcast, please be sure to tell them about www.thecanadiancommie.com. Glad to have you. Thanks. Trump campaign attacks walls as dangerously liberal. Bread Bunny, good to see you, Bread Bunny. Feel like it's been a minute. Hey, John, can you recommend a good book on dialectical thinking? Not just historically and economically, but with internal dialogue and perspective as well. What an interesting question, actually, because, like, your question is specifically about dialectical thinking, right? Like, so much of how I think about the world has been derived by, like, an amalgamation. That I guess I am the book. You know what I mean? That it's just like a bunch of different sources. Like at its core, it's just about evidence. It's about just evidence, and it's about looking at what is provable, evidentiary, right? And one of the key things. And I realized this maybe too late in my life. If the evidence is showing you something is the case, you just believe it. You just got to believe it. You just got to say to yourself, okay, that's what it is. And it doesn't matter if you have a preconceived idea of how you want it to be, right? Like, I think one of the classic examples that I use a lot for what I'm talking about is how my perspective of drug users shifted over time, and because of evidence. And there was a study that was done back in like the 70s or the 80s, where they basically took a rat, put it in a cage, and they had a bottle of water and they had a bottle of heroin-laced water. And the rat basically took the heroin-laced water until it died, right? Well, along comes another research, and this, of course, is used to justify the war on drugs. That's the reason why this study is so important, because essentially they say, oh, drugs are addictive by themselves. There's this moralizing that happens with drug users, right? That they want to be hooked on this, that they choose this path, that this is the thing. And that there's a chemical composition to it as well, that a person can get addicted to the substance itself. Well, then another study comes along and basically looks at that original study and says, yeah, you took a rat and isolated it, separated it from anything, gave it nothing to do except heroin. And so it did heroin to death. Okay. How about we create a rat park, like a rat utopia, where we have a whole bunch of rats living in a community together, and there's things to do, and there's toys, and there's scratching posts, and there's wood chips, and places for them to burrow, and tunnels, and all kinds of stuff going on that any rat would love. And let's have the rats live in this little rat environment together. Okay, well, now let's pull a rat out of that environment and put him into the original study environment. Sure enough, the rat starts doing heroin. Okay, well then they take the rat out of the isolation chamber and they put him back into the rat utopia, and guess what happens? He stops doing heroin. He reconnects with his buddies and he's like, oh man, you'll never believe what happened, oh my god, and they just continue living their life. They even put water and heroin-laced water in the rat utopia. And some of the rats will use the heroin-laced water, but then they won't get hooked on it. They'll just be like, oh, wow, what a trip. And then they'll move on with their life. Right? And this really gave lie to the whole concept and really broke apart the idea of why people use drugs, how drugs operate, the chemical dependency argument, right? And really showed that there is this community aspect and that people will do drugs in isolation and people will do drugs if they are in a state that they can't escape. And so that really changed my personal perspective on drug users and drug use, and really changed my perspective on what it is we need to be focusing on. That so many people have the solution of, we'll just take the drug user and put them in rehab and force them to get clean. It's like, okay, cool, but if they get shot out of rehab at the end of that and they end up on the street, what do you think's going to happen? Right? Bread Bunny continues to write, I think one of the things you inspire me most with is how quickly and effectively you form solid, insightful understandings of so much, so effective and often quickly. I'd love to build big concepts myself like you do one day. I mean, that's very kind of you to say, Bread Bunny. I really do appreciate it. I think the thing that has kind of helped me, I've been studying this and looking at this and pursuing this and informing myself for so long. Originally from like the fundamentalist Christian perspective, but it has obviously evolved over time. But I've been doing it for so long that I've come to see there are broad brush strokes, and that similarities abound. Like I'll give you the clearest example of this one. I was talking about this just yesterday. Anytime I talk about African countries, well, the first thing that's in my head is, okay, cool, when was your colonial period? Right? Because all of them were colonized at one point. I think like literally Ethiopia was the one that wasn't. And so when you're talking about African history and you're talking about modern African state, well, the question is, okay, who colonized you at what point? What happened after the colonial period? How did you come out of the colonial period? Have you come out of the colonial period? Right? And that's because that's so ubiquitous. It's like this event that happened to everybody. And so once you kind of understand those broad brushstrokes, you can understand things very quickly. And there's a repetition that happens, right? It's not new or unique. Like, the CIA will overthrow countries, right? And so I am never in a position where I am thinking to myself, what, the CIA was involved? What? You know? I in fact, when I see any kind of major event happen, the first thing I ask is, how is the CIA involved? What's the CIA's involvement? Where is it? Right? Are they trying to hide it? Did they hide it? And I feel like just those acceptances of those realities is what puts me ahead of the game. Of just being like completely unsurprised by the existence and interference of the CIA in world events. Whereas I talk to people on the regular. You hear me talk to them on the regular of people who are just like, you think the CIA was involved? I'm like, yes. Like, it's crazy that you don't. Like, it's just absolutely insane that you don't. And there are just patterns. There are just patterns. Like, people are not that complex. Like, this stuff is not that complex. I genuinely believe that anybody can do this kind of stuff. That anybody can study political philosophy or political thought or geopolitics. That anybody can look at this. That if you're a plumber, you know, working a full-time job, and in your spare time you take a look at global politics, you can decipher what's going on just as easily as anybody else. Right? Because it's not that complicated. Humans make things complicated. We complicate things on purpose. And there's reasons for why we complicate things. The most common one is that someone's benefiting from the complication. Right? So the clearest, like most nakedly obvious example of this is someone like Jordan Peterson. Right? That Jordan Peterson makes things intentionally complex and intentionally obtuse because it benefits him to do so. Right? That it's a good way to sort of filibuster out of a debate that you're losing which he loses debates all the time because he's not a very intelligent person. It's a good way to obfuscate the point and sort of fluster your opponent into like this constant line of definitioning, right? And it's gotten like embarrassing now, where he's like, well, what do you mean we? What do you mean it? What do you mean that? Like, what do you mean we, Jordan? Like, fuck you, dude. You're not even worth talking to anymore. Because he isn't. And yet he gets to talk to Elon Musk for some reason. But it's, and so somebody benefits from the complexity. Like, for decades and decades and decades, anytime you tried to take a look at the Israel-Palestine issue, very complex issue, very dense, intense, very, like, but it isn't. Like, as soon as you understand what settler colonialism is, and as soon as you understand the history of settler colonialism and what it looks like, right? You take a look at Israel and you immediately go, oh, settler colonialism. Got it. And it's very straightforward. It's very simple. But it's made complex. And so the number one reason why things are made complex is because someone benefits from that complexity. Like, if your profession is based on the idea that I have knowledge that you don't have, then a good way to protect your position and your profession is to pretend as though what you're doing is so complex it can't be understood by the layman. And every time the layman is to interact with it, it needs to be made as indecipherable and as complex as possible. Whereas most of the time, the thing that's being done is actually fairly straightforward, right? It's not actually that complex. Complexities, when complexity exists in a genuine way, in a way that's not because of capitalist chicanery or people being shitbags, or I'd say the second most common reason things are made complex is because people are trying to tie a Gorgon knot so they don't need to deal with themselves and their own shittiness, right? That instead of just looking themselves in the face and being like, yeah, you're just doing this, you're just like this, right? Instead of that, you tie up like a philosophical Gorgon knot that then you can pretend it's big and complex, and it takes forever to unknot. When the reality is you're just not dealing with it because it hurts you to do, causes you physical pain to look in the mirror and be like, yeah, you're just a shitbag. Like, that's it. Like, there's no two ways about it. Yeah, you just did that thing because you're selfish and you wanted it, right? That's all. And so things are usually, when things are genuinely complex, it is because people are stepping into the unknown. And that does happen, right? And that's when things are genuinely complex. Because people don't know what they're looking at, and they don't know what it is. Like, when you're foraging into unknown territory, it is genuinely complex. Because there are all of these complexities. But one of the things that can help when you're going into unknown territory is having a basis of pattern recognition, which is why it's so important to read theory, so that when you get into a situation that is kind of unknown, you can be like, okay, but this looks like this, right? This looks like this, right? So you need to explain to me how this isn't the same as that. And if you... and that, of course, has its own pitfalls, of course. I would say that Western Marxists have fallen into a pitfall in regards to China, for example. But I don't know. I feel like I'm being very long-winded. I don't know if I'm being helpful at all. But one of the things I think that really, really, really has helped me on this kind of journey, on what I do and how I think and how I talk about things, is immediately taking the position of the other. That we have a tendency in this society, and you can see this even among, we were talking yesterday about how progressive leftists can still have this pro-war position or still be on the side of Ukraine, right? And it's because of othering. It's because we other people. right? That I am a human and they are another. They are something other than a human. They are other. And that the moment you break through that, the moment you can break through that and get into the position of saying, okay, this is what's happening, what's their perspective? And listening to that perspective and being honest about that perspective and not being afraid of that perspective, and putting yourself in their own shoes and actually saying, like, oh yeah, what would I do? How would I act? What would I think if I was in that kind of position? That really opens things up. That really opens things up in a big way. And that to make that as automatic as possible. Literally just like an event occurs and you're already on the other side. You're already looking at it from the other person's perspective. I think that helps inform a lot of how I think and what I do. Because it's not complex. It's made complex. Like, I'll use Ukraine as a great example, right? Like, yeah, of course Russia is going to act the way it's acting. I think it's crazy to believe it wouldn't, right? It obviously would act this way. It doesn't make it inhuman. It doesn't make Putin Hitler. It doesn't make it all this kind of stuff crazy or unusual. Like, Russia is looking at a very dangerous organization slowly moving towards it. It's putting up red flags and saying, if you cross this line, we will respond. And then they cross the line, and so Russia responds. Like, it's not complex. But if you don't actually take the position of the other person and the other entity, if you don't actually look at things from their perspective, then you'll just never get there, right? You'll always be othering. You'll always be on the inside of the empire, looking to the empire to protect you from the dark, nebulous others that exist. Yeah, and for me, that's the keystone point, the linchpin of my thought. There is no such thing as the other. Right? That's just something that we imagine. That everybody's just a human. We're all human beings trying our goddamn best with the hand that we've been dealt and the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Some of us work in deli shops. Some of us are are street sweepers. Some of us work in cafes. Some of us are doctors. Some of us are lawyers. Some of us are the president of the goddamn country. Right? And the circumstances that exist around us that created those outcomes are far more powerful and enormous than we are as individuals, very obviously. And so when we look at powerful people in positions of power, we should look at them not that much differently than we would look at an accountant. And just be like, yeah, okay, what's he doing? What's his thing? And it isn't until an organization really proves it to you, right? Really proves to you that they are a bad faith acting, disingenuous organization, like the CIA, that you should conclude, okay, the CIA is like a large terrorist organization, right? So, of course, they're going to terrorize people because they're a terrorist organization. That's what they do. Anyway. That was all very long-winded, Bread Bunny, and you say, thank you, John, I appreciate your advice. Oh, well, if call it advice if you want. Just keep reading. Just keep reading, keep learning, keep finding out more. Never be satisfied. Never be satisfied. Never think to yourself, I know enough. Never think to yourself, I've got it now. Like, it's all, there's always another thing to know. There's always something else to learn. And above all else, I talk about this a lot. There's no heroes in the conversation. And there really are no villains in the conversation. They're all just they're all just humans. We're all just people trying our best, failing mostly, caught up in our own dumb bullshit, right? Like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, these guys are just people caught up in their own stupid bullshit. Like, who is more caught up in their stupid bullshit than Elon Musk? Right? Like, Elon Musk's entire life is just stupid bullshit. He's obviously a stupid bullshitter. Right? Like, nothing he says is going to happen does. He's just bullshitting everybody the whole fucking time. And we're all just enabling him. And it looks to me like the only thing that he really wants is his dad's affection. Right? He just wants people to like him. And he wants people to think that he's cool. Which is why he keeps doing stupid shit. And he's just caught in this like cycle of being a dumbass and he can't get out of it. And there's like literally no one around him that's willing to be like, dude, that's a dumb idea. Like, stop being such a dumbass. Because he has so much money and so much wealth that he gets to create a reality around him. And so if somebody was around him that was like, bro, what the fuck? Then that person would just stop getting invited. Right? Because he wants to make like a little Elon cult or whatever. It's just crazy. And he's caught in that. And you can see like his daughter, what his daughter posts about him all the time. I've been reading it, and it's just like scathing. It's just like a burning down of his whole life happening while he's still alive. And it's just like, it's just wild, right? It's just wild. But if you get caught in this pattern of veneration or denigration, right? He's either a hero or a villain, an angel or a demon. Well, then you can't really be honest. You can't really be honest about his perspective and about what it is that he's doing and who he is and how he operates. Because he is somehow beyond human. Whether that's beyond human by being an angel or beyond human by being a demon, I think that's the result is very similar, right? And so that's my biggest piece of advice. Like, your dad is not a villain. Your dad is not a hero. Your dad is just a talking monkey like you, trying his best and looking like a dumbass while doing it. Now imagine that your dad owned Twitter. Eric, a long time ago, you said, oh, this reminds me, I just finished listening to Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber. Yeah, absolutely a good call out, Bullshit Jobs. Very enlightened book, yeah. All of David Graeber's writing. Super good. I wouldn't be too surprised. If David Graeber was taken out with, like, the cancer gun or whatever. Because, like, he was writing some very prescient things. He was heavily involved in the Occupy movement. David Graeber, in the 19th century, the LTV was considered common sense. Not only was it considered common sense, but it was commonly taught that working for another person is actually degrading. Yeah. And people need to be free from this form of slavery, and it was because of capitalism that time itself became a commodity and became normal, that our time belongs to someone, and it's fine. Another critique I found interesting, he said that leftist parties ceased to be leftist parties, but became the party of managers. Yeah, that's right. He also went on a whole spiel about how the rise of managerial class created a new form of bureaucracy, where managers just make the operation of business worse and have no real value. There's a section that I thought you would like because it explains why entertainment became the way it is today. Yeah, it's one of those books you can listen to 100 times and learn something new. His book, Debt the First 5,000 Years, I believe that's the name of it, is also extremely good. Joe Anthony says, that's why Peterson is talking to Musk. Peterson's mental masturbation benefits in Elon Musk. Well, Elon Musk, just like Jordan Peterson, cosplay at being intelligent, right? Like, they just insist upon it. They insist on being perceived as this, like, Tony Stark hyper-intellectual, and they're both just kind of dumbasses. Like, they're not actually that smart or clever. I think that's why Peterson is a very angry person, because he really believes that he is intelligent and he's not. And it frustrates him that people won't acknowledge his hyper intelligence when he's around them. It's like, bro, because you're not. Like, you're not smart. Like, yeah, great. You read one book. Cool. Like, you sat in a room by yourself and wrote a book nobody read. Good for you. Like, but like, you just kind of look like a weirdo to the rest of us, dude. Like, it's just kind of an oddball shit. Nilo writes, lifelong learning is good, but sharing what we learn along the way before we go is great, because learning things just for ourselves, only to take it with us to our graves, is less meaningful. Yeah, very profound. Content writes, I'm just going to be based. Elon is a demon. Dude, I think if Elon Musk was a demon, we'd be going to Mars. Like, a demon would get that shit done. For sure. Like, a demon would get that Hyperloop finished up, man. Yeah, if you ask me. Right? They would murder a bunch of people doing it. They would build something into the system so that every time a car passed a checkpoint, like a child somewhere died or had their blood drained or something. Right? That'd be like demonic shit. But they get the job done. I tell you what. Kevin writes, we can't just support Kamala without putting pressure on her. We have to exert maximum pressure and threaten to withhold our vote to get her to comply. And then and when and if she concedes, then we can vote. For her, if she's our only option to prevent a Trump presidency, immediately throwing support behind her is politically idiotic and malpractice. Like, am I the only one that really sees that this is how it's going to be forever in America? That the choice is always going to be, from now until the whole system collapses and decays into irrelevance, that the choice will always be between a Trump and a Kamala? Like, am I the only one that's put that together? Because it feels like it. That, like, let's say you vote Kamala, right? Let's say that happens. Let's say the Democrats come in. Let's say that it's the Democrats now. Okay. So corporate power is in charge. The steady erosion of corporate oversight, the steady erosion of any governmental inclusion in corporate power, that project remains intact. We are in this state of steady decline where Project 2025 is like the finish line or one of the goal lines, right? And so they're going to just steadily degrade down that way, right? And that the choice really, the only choice you have in these elections is the speed by which you want to get to Project 2025. That's the only choice. That, do you want to go slowly or do you want to go fast? And that's the only choice you have forever in American politics, right? That you're voting for the lesser of two evils, and both of the evils are aligned in their perspective, and that perspective is Project 2025. All people within the party agree, right? Democrats and Republicans. It's just, do you want it to happen today or do you want it to happen tomorrow? And that if Kamala wins the election, okay, then it'll be tomorrow. And then the next election will come around and it's the same goddamn choice. And it'll always be that choice. Over and over and over and over and over again. Gotta vote blue or else the red gets in. Gotta vote blue or else the red gets in. Gotta vote blue or else the red gets in. Over and 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 over again. And the winner is capital. Like, this is why I'm talking about revolution. This is why I'm not interested in electoral politics. This is the only reason I point out electoral politics, is to hopefully show people that these parties are in alliance with one another, that they're in an allegiance with one another, that they like each other, that they want each other to be in the positions that they are in, because the one benefits the other. One holds the shield and the other holds the sword. That's what they are. And Kamala pointing out that Trump is weird is just her best goal to become president, because that's what she wants for herself. She wants to be the president in this vanity project that she's in. She doesn't give a fuck about America. She doesn't give a fuck about the American people. She wants to go to whatever her version of Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island is. She wants to have like a personal prison of like gimp boys or whatever. Right? She wants to keep innocent people in prison and make fun of them. Like, that's who she is. Jeremy writes, good to see you, by the way, bud. Dems could not vote for their representative. This feels like a very bad move to get voters to support you, apart from TDS. I don't think I understand your comment, Jeremy. Sorry. Like, I don't know what TDS is. Yep. We're free to choose as long as we choose either a fascist or a Nazi, right? Kevin writes, I completely agree with you, John. We cannot relegate our political actions only to electoralism. We have to build the left from the outside and change the system using all of our tools to our advantage. Compton writes, you see, this is my take. Why do we tolerate Project 2025 at all? The people should take those as fighting words and respond appropriately. Project 2025 is just going to become Project 2029. Yep. That's it. Like, this is it in perpetuity from now until the end of time. Well, until the end of America. Right? Like, and we'll all pretend like this is democracy. Like, that to me is the most wild thing about talking to people, is that, like, they actually think this is democracy. Like, literally they're governed by like 5 people, basically. Like this oligarchy that we have. Right? And yet for some reason it matters which courtier is in power. It matters which one of their servants delivers the bad news. Like, it's really quite something to behold. Quite something to behold. I saw a meme that said Project 2025 is QAnon for libs. I don't know if I would describe that. Like, Project 2025 is real. Like, it's a real document. And there's some concerns in it. And Donald Trump has said some concerning things. Like, I understand why people have this kind of alarmist attitude towards the Republicans, and I understand why people feel they need to gravitate towards the Democrats. Like, I understand it. Like, it makes a type of sense. It's not illegitimate. But, like, in 4 years, it's going to be the same thing, right? And then 4 years from there, it'll be the same thing again. Because as long as they can scare you into voting for a cop, then the system is working perfectly fine, right? Vote for the fascist. Vote for the Nazi. Vote for the fascist, right? Vote for the fascist or you get the Nazi. Okay, well, who wins in that arrangement? And most people don't really see it that way. Most people are just so terrified by the Nazi that they're willing to vote for the fascist. And then say that they somehow voted for the lesser of two evils. So, this is why revolutionary energy is important. This is why it's important for us to build revolutionary power and to build revolutionary organizations that exist outside of the framework of electoral politics. Because there just does come a point where the system of electoral politics stops responding, and we're basically there. The system of electoral politics is no longer responding. That it doesn't matter who you elect. It doesn't matter who you put into positions of power. It doesn't matter. They're not going to respond. They're going to watch millions of people become homeless. They're going to watch poverty spread. They're going to watch the despair spread throughout the country. And then they're going to go to their mansion and crack open a bottle of wine and be like, those plebs just need to work harder. That's what's going to happen. They are not going to respond rationally. They are not going to listen to us. That maybe if they feel threatened enough, they'll put in some kind of, 2% over 25 years kind of solution and call that a legitimate thing that got actually done. But the populace is beginning to become more and more aware that the electoral system doesn't represent them. Right? Like, the electoral system doesn't represent you. It hasn't represented you for 40 years. I've never experienced a single election where any of the people who are up for choice represented any of my interests at any point. And the populace is becoming more and more aware of it, which is why there's a decline in voter turnout. More and more people are just throwing up their hands and being like, the system doesn't represent me anyway. It's not interested in representing me. And there's a classic American line that I feel really applies when you're looking at a system that no longer represents you. No taxation without representation. That if we're not going to be represented, and the system is going to act like it can represent us when it doesn't, well, then there's a path for us. And there's something that we should be following, and there's something that we should be focusing on, and there's something we should be doing. And it's not about voting blue no matter who. Nilo writes, always interesting to wonder who starts these memes and why. Well, the CIA is taking everything over, right? Like the internet is going to become just shittier and shittier, right? Like I've got something up here that says Reddit CEO hints that subreddit paywalls are on the way, right? Just like shittier and shittier content, just shittier and shittier. The internet will just fall into a terrible and horrible decline. Well, guys, I think I am going to call this one a little early. I've got to get up really early tomorrow, so I think I've got to call it now. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.